Welcome back to another episode of the Kings Pulse podcast presented by the Kings Herald. My name is Brendan Nunez, and today I'm recording by myself, recording this after the Sacramento Kings had a pretty horrible loss to the Memphis Grizzlies. It's actually early morning on Monday when the Kings lost that game on Sunday afternoon in a pretty dramatic fashion that I guess fans are probably sadly used to seeing at this point. Pretty close game in the first half that got out of hand very quickly in the third quarter here. But before I dive into that, and a lot of today is going to be playing different clips from the post-game press conferences that we heard after that game, because I think Alvin Gentry was very emotional and had a lot of things to say that I think is good for the fan base to get an opportunity to hear where kind of everybody behind the scenes is at when we're seeing so many of the same issues over and over again. You'll hear from Terence Davis a little bit here as well, and in a brief moment from De'Aaron Fox that we heard after that game against Memphis as well. But before I get into that, I kind of just want to explain that, between this episode and the last is almost 2 weeks, and that's easily the longest that I've gone since starting this podcast. And I started this about 2 years ago now. It's just been quite a transition period for myself personally. Recently, earlier this season, getting credentialed to games for the very first time and getting to attend as media and trying to understand all the ins and outs of that, like 7 p.m. game. All of a sudden, I'm in my car about 4:00 on the way over to the stadium and not getting home until 11:30. And I don't have somebody that, most of the time, there's not going to be somebody available to record a podcast with me at 11:30 at night. And it takes me some time to kind of edit in these audio clips from the post-game conferences that I'm a part of now that I think are important for you guys to hear. So it's probably not even midnight or something like that until I'd be ready to go for somebody to record with me. So that's just been a little bit less of an option as I kind of go through this transition. And that's made me get used to recording solo, which is something I hadn't done for a long time, and I'm getting comfortable with, but just one of those transition periods. And I think going through the entire learning process of being in media and trying to network with people and just learn the whole game and ins and outs, do's and don'ts of media has been a big task for me. I have my day job that I'm doing in the meantime as well, working on building any sort of relationships and networking while I'm there. And then I also am trying to expand in other aspects of content as well. I just put out my first freelance piece for the Sacramento Bee, which I'm ecstatic to be a part of the Bee, obviously, but it was just another thing that was a part of this transition. So just long-winded way of saying, and the holidays as well, obviously, with Christmas just in the rearview mirror, barely, that long-winded way of me saying, I hope you can understand why there's been a gap between episodes here. But yeah, I'm getting accustomed to kind of what this whole new point of view looks like, and just being credentialed and having access and things like this has been a transition, but I'm getting used to it here. So don't expect any sort of gap like this. This is absolutely the outlier, but just to kind of explain myself there. And I appreciate the support that I've gotten throughout that process. So yeah, just wanted to explain that a little bit before going into this. And then also before I spend time talking about the Memphis game specifically, I do want to acknowledge the games that I didn't get to talk about because of that gap that I had taken for the reasons just explained. Tyrese Halliburton obviously being the standout. There were so many Kings players in health and safety protocol, and I won't spend too long talking about this since everybody has spent plenty of time focusing on this. The Kings were without De'Aaron Fox, Davion Mitchell, Terence Davis, Marvin Bagley, Lou King, Alex Len. I feel like I'm missing someone. I know that Rashaan Holmes was out for a while, not for health and safety protocol, but for a laceration in his eye. And Tyrese Halliburton just really had to do everything. The Kings were signing Ade Murkey, Emmanuel Moody, Justin Robinson. And then Tyrese Halliburton is forced into the primary role where he's getting blitzed in the pick and roll. A thing that I thought when he first saw that at the NBA level, he would really struggle with, because I didn't think his handle was, I guess you could say, up to par. That feels like poor wording and underselling where I viewed it, but I felt like his handle would cause some issues when it came to getting doubled, even though he is obviously a phenomenal passer, and I think we already knew that ahead of time. But him being the primary guy and needing to look for his own shot a little bit more often and being the only initiator out there. I don't know if there was another like guy that you could very confidently say was an above average passer and especially advantage creator out there, and to Tyrese's credit, this is the thing I wrote about in the B, so definitely go check out that piece. It does a lot for me as I kind of try to make some steps over there. But 4 games in a row of at least 20 points and 10 assists for Tyrese Halliburton. He's the first player in Sacramento Kings history to have 4 games in a row of doing that. First one coming against Memphis, 21 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds, and only 3 turnovers. That's in 37 minutes. Kings lost that game, however. The next one is against San Antonio, 27 points, 11 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals as well, and only 3 turnovers in the 37 minutes that Tyrese played in that win against San Antonio. And then you see a game against Golden State with 24 points, 11 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals. There's 5 turnovers in that one. And then the most recent one before guys had come back, the 4th in a row of this 20-10 streak, is 22 points, 13 assists, which is a new career high for him, 3 rebounds, 3 steals, a block as well. And there are 7 turnovers in that 43 minutes that he played. But Tyrese Halliburton is just clearly absolutely gassed coming out of these games. And we've talked about this enough. I've written about it. I'm sure every other pod has talked about this as well, but just wanted to kind of acknowledge how important that stretch is from Halliburton and him displaying an ability to be the primary creator and initiator on a team as the primary playmaker. The roster that he was working with, I think, is an absolute outlier. And also it's ridiculous to entertain this whole, maybe we need to move on from Fox because of these 4 games of Halliburton. Like Luka Doncic, the Mavericks are sitting there talking about how they need to find another guy that can ease the load on Luka and be able to play make for him. Like, even if you think that Tyrese is this player that can be your number one option and the engine of your offense, he needs another guy that can help with those responsibilities and not force him to initiate every single time down the floor. Like, he was absolutely gassed after every single one of these games, and De'Aaron Fox can be that guy. So yeah, all I have to say about that. But going into this game against the Memphis Grizzlies, and by the way, the Kings did lose 3 of those 4 games while all the players had been in health and safety protocol. So while it was encouraging from Tyrese and amazing to see that, I think that, obviously they were still losing games, which is what's really going to matter at the end of this season. And as we sort of approach the trade deadline, what direction maybe this team is going to go in. So going into Memphis, they'd lost 3 of 4, 6 of their last 8 in total. But Alvin Gentry was returning, even though Doug Christie was refreshing to talk to in press conferences for sure, but still kind of his first opportunity to be the head coach of some games. So I think that was a good opportunity for him. Another thing that a lot of people have touched on, so I'm not going to dive too much into, but I thought Doug did a solid job from what I can tell, just kind of implementing what Gentry already had in place. But going into Memphis, Gentry was back, De'Aaron Fox was back, Terence Davis, Marvin Bagley, and Lou King were all back. But Davion Mitchell, Nehemiah Shkita, and Alex Len were still all unavailable in health and safety protocol. Memphis was coming into this without Dylan Brooks and DeAnthony Melton. Those 2 were announced about the time that we first got to the stadium. It was pretty last minute. But they did already know that Zaire Williams, Jarrett Culver were also going to be unavailable as well. And then some end of bench guys in Sam Merrill, Yves Pons, and Santi Aldama. So Memphis was dealing with a lot of shorthandedness on their side as well. John Morant was available along with, Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr. So they still had some of their primary guys, but obviously so did Sacramento. And again, I'm just going to spend a lot of time kind of using these other clips to really cement my point or get across what I think are the important things, and those clips being primarily from Alvin Gentry and then a little bit of Terence Davis and Fox as well. But the first half, I thought the Kings that were playing solid. Neither team could really hit a shot, which was obviously impactful. And I think that Memphis should have made more, typically would have made more than they did. They ended the half 3 of 14 from 3, which includes 0 of 3 from Jaren Jackson, 0 of 1 from John Conchar. Killian Tilly was 0 of 1. Tyus Jones was 0 of 2. So while they're not a great three-point shooting team, they do have some guys that are hitting the long ball at an elite clip this year that weren't really knocking down what I thought were decent looks in the first half. But the Kings did a decent job of not letting John Morant get all too comfortable. But I do feel like it was just sloppy basketball in the first half from both sides. But in the end, Sacramento did go into the half with a lead. They managed to hold Memphis to only 49 points in that half. They were up 51-49 at the end of two quarters. It is notable Rashaan Holmes was bad in his time out there. I don't know how really else to say it. He only played 8 minutes in that first half because he managed to pick up 3 fouls in those minutes, that includes 0 of 4 from the field with 3 rebounds, and he had 2 blocks in there as well. But Holmes wasn't really doing anything on the offensive end. He missed the push shot a couple times. Wasn't a great screen and roll partner in this one. And obviously was struggling on the defensive end. I think he was maybe a step slow sometimes, always been a little bit foul prone, but that really stood out in this one. And he did say after last game, which was his first game back from what I believe was a 7-game absence due to a laceration in his right eye, he said after last post game that, it was, I want to say he said the first time, but I'll go with one of, if not the first time in his career that he had an injury where he wasn't able to do conditioning and stay in game shape. So there's definitely still an aspect where I think Holmes needs to be given a little bit of slack for he's still getting back in game shape, and you're going to be able to say the same thing with some of these other guys, De'Aaron Fox, Marvin Bagley, Lou King, and Terence Davis. Like, while a lot of them, I know TD and Fox both said that they were asymptomatic after the game, and still able to do conditioning in the 4 games that they were sitting at home in health and safety protocol. There's just a difference between being in good shape and being in NBA game shape. So I think all those guys get a little bit of slack, but Rashaan Holmes specifically had the longest stretch and played really poorly in this one. But then going into the second half, De'Aaron Fox had a really big dunk. The fan base was, I should mention, the fans were very engaged in this one. There's been plenty of moments where the stadium, Golden One, feels pretty empty, but I think the combination of being I believe it was 3 p.m. start time on a Sunday that also happened to be the day after Christmas, and all of these guys were going to be coming back. I think there was a lot of excitement by the way that Tyrese had been playing, made for a lot of people in the stadium. And I think there was a lot of energy. There was a lot of unhappiness with foul calls, which I think the whistle was a little much for me at times. I think you could say that on both sides probably favored Memphis a little bit more, but certainly not the reason that Sacramento lost this game. But it had the fan base, it had the fans in the crowd very engaged and vocal. They were emotional. They were, like I said, engaged in this game. And then De'Aaron Fox, in a transition opportunity from Tyrese Halliburton, throws down this like double pump tomahawk dunk, and the stadium was very loud at that point. The fouls had just taken place, or the fouls that I think the fan base was not too happy about it just taken place not long ago. So there was a lot of engagement, a lot of energy that you were feeling from Golden One Center at that moment. And as that dunk goes down, there's about 8 minutes and 15 seconds left in the third quarter. Sacramento's down 58-61. Ideally, the Kings would ride off that momentum and go on a run from there. It's a very close game at this point. Like I said, only a 3-point difference. After Fox threw down that really exciting highlight tomahawk dunk. And then Memphis goes on a 22-5 run. And all of a sudden, for me, it happened very quickly. I was busy kind of trying to clip the Fox dunk and take note of the atmosphere of the stadium and kind of it, all of a sudden I was like, whoa, Memphis just went on an 8-0 run. And the next thing, it's a 22-5 run. All of a sudden the Kings are down 20 right after when it felt like momentum was shifting in their favor. And I think Memphis could sense that and nip that in the butt right away, didn't let it happen. Kings never recovered. It was a horrible second half. I'm going to get into the details of what stood out to me in a little bit because it's a lot of the same issues. But I actually think when Alvin Gentry came out post-game, which, by the way, Kings ended up losing 127-102, just absolutely embarrassed in this one. But I think when Gentry came out post-game and gave his initial statement is a good way to kind of start the conversation here. Again, you're going to hear a lot from Gentry in this one because I thought that what he had to say was really important. And, as I've been able to be a part of these press conferences a lot more, it's given me what I think is a very different perspective and a little bit more insight to some of the behind the scenes things going on. And I think that the entire fan base should be able to get that same insight since this is all public conversations. So I'm going to be sharing these a lot more on future episodes. And yeah, like I said, here's Gentry's initial thoughts post game when the Kings were embarrassed against Memphis in the second half.
It's the most disappointing I've been in 34 years in the NBA. I can honestly say that performance was absolutely ridiculous. We didn't play hard. We didn't compete. We gave up 19 offensive rebounds for, 37 points or some astronomical figure. We didn't guard the ball. We didn't guard screen and rolls. We didn't follow the game plan. All of those things. And to be honest with you, it's the most disappointing game that I've been involved with. No competitiveness whatsoever. And then we got those guys out there talking about, when you have, just go ahead, ask questions. That's fine, because I don't want to get into it anymore. I think anybody out there that watched the game understand that performance right there was absolutely, it was just ridiculous. I don't know any other words to use because we didn't compete and we didn't do anything. We didn't move the basketball. We didn't attack them. We didn't stop their drives. We didn't stop their screen and rolls. We went over a couple of simple plays today, and we didn't guard them at all. So yeah, I'm totally disappointed, and everybody in this building should be disappointed.
Alvin, were you able to share that same kind of message to the locker room after the game?
Yes, I did. I made sure that I did. I'm telling you guys, you can't get a reputation in this league of being a team where you can come into their home gym and do what they just did to us. I'm just telling you, it will stay with you in the NBA. If you let teams come in and do what they did to us, they basically toyed with us. And we're not that team. We're not a team that people should come in here and be able to toy with. So yes, if you ask me if I'm upset and disappointed, you're damn right I am.
Points in the paint, coach.
We never stopped them. So the offensive rebounds and the points in the paint they were all in the same situation. They shot it and they got it back. They had the ball in the paint the whole night. And so when they missed it, they just got it back and put it back in the basket. And so we never stopped them. We never got into the ball and we never made them feel us. And I think Doug said it every night up here, when he was coaching the team. They have to feel you. They can't play in an area where they don't feel you. And by that, you have to get into their body. And they've got to understand that it's not going to be straight line drives to the basket. And they never felt us the entire night.
To put it bluntly, the Kings have been pushovers. They've lacked physicality. Terence Davis, the wording that he used post-game was that he feels like other teams are licking their chops when they come into Golden One Center. They, every single team views it as a winnable game, which the term winnable is whatever, but you get the point. I can't blame Alvin for being frustrated. Like, I think he should be. Everybody should be. And for Gentry, a guy who, like he said, 34 years in the NBA, to come out and say very bluntly that this is the most disappointed he's ever been in his career, just tells you all you need to know. And I think that it stems from kind of like Gentry was talking about, it's the same damn issues over and over and over. What have we heard, right? Like defense. And you heard Gentry talk about they were unable to contain anyone on the perimeter. There was no sort of physicality there. I think that there's a couple of guys to blame there, but really nobody is blameless. So I'm not going to point specific fingers when it comes to that. I thought they did a decent job in the first half, and I say I'm not going to point fingers, but there is a specific player that I want to have a conversation about in a little bit here. But perimeter containment was an issue. Memphis had 72 points in the paint. Gentry's talked about how it's so much more difficult to play defense when you're turning the ball over and forced to defend in transition while opponents have a numbers advantage. And Sacramento managed to have 18 turnovers in this one. They made life difficult on themselves. Memphis, like I said, wasn't hitting shots in the first half, but then they ended up starting to do that. The defensive rotations from Sacramento were really rough. They weren't sharp. And then the other aspect that we've heard nonstop is limiting opposing second chance points, and specifically through offensive rebounds on the other end. 19 offensive rebounds for Memphis, 6 of them from Steven Adams, 5 from John Conchar. John Conchar is 6'5". That's not like his specialty or anything like this. That's a lack of making sure you're putting a body on your guy and boxing him out, and not allowing the guy that you're matched up against with specifically to be the one to go crash the boards and beat you on the glass. Lack of sharpness. I keep using that word. That's what we heard Fox say earlier in the year, and I think it's fitting. There is effort, but I think there's also just a lack of quick understanding and taking the needed action sometimes. Specifically, there's one guy that stands out to me, to be honest. But the quote we've heard a lot is the guys need to look in the mirror. And, it's got to come from within each one of these individuals. You'll hear Terence Davis say it. You'll hear Alvin Gentry say it. And that's what I'm going to play right here before I get into the guy that I think personally has really been frustrating me.
There, at some stage, there's got to be a sense of pride, individual pride. It can't be on the coach. It can't be on the GM. It can't be on the secretaries. It's got to be you. You have to go out and compete and do it yourself. And as a coach, I got to find the guys that will do that. That's supposed to be my job, to put guys out there that will compete. And we're not passing the blame off, because it's all of us. When you have a performance like that, it's everybody that's associated with this. But we have to have people that wants to go out and compete, and they got to have pride. You got to have self-pride. You got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, did I do everything that I possibly could tonight to help this team win? And if you did that, then fine. But if you didn't, you have to ask yourself why you're not doing it.
I mean, what guys do we feel like can check that box tonight? Every single thing is tough from my point of view, obviously, but I'll check off a few guys that I feel like are able to say, about 80%, right? Just because, again, it's hard from my point of view to say, oh, somebody gave 100%. I'm going to start with Damian Jones. He had a really good first half. He's played really well these last few games. Damian Jones was the best center on Sacramento's roster tonight. I keep saying tonight. In this last game against the Memphis Grizzlies. He's been the best center for a few games in a row here now. Alex Len has been unavailable. Rashaan Holmes has been recovering from injury. So a lot of times it's between him and Tristan Thompson, and Thompson has had his moments. But Damian Jones has played really good. 27 minutes, 6 of 8 from the field. He was willing to put up some threes. He was 0 of 2 from downtown. We saw him hit a couple recently, but 15 points and 6 rebounds with a steal, a block, and an assist in there as well. In his 27 minutes, I thought Damian Jones played really well with good energy on both sides. Terence Davis is another guy that, I don't think shots were falling at a great rate for him, clearly with his 4 of 12 from the field and 1 of 5 from distance. But in 16 minutes, he did still manage 15 points and 2 rebounds with a steal and a block in there as well. I thought that while maybe he was a little bit out of control, that he had great energy on both ends of the floor. He had a really big steal. I want to say it was at the end of the half, or maybe it was the end of the third. A big steal in isolation that led to a transition opportunity that he just got fouled on, and got free throw opportunities where he was 6 of 6 from the free throw line. So 16 minutes and 15 points from Terence Davis. I thought that was really good effort from him. He was one of the few guys that I thought was consistently attacking the paint for Sacramento on the offensive end. I really like the effort that we saw from him, and you'll get some post-game clips from him here in a little bit. Harrison Barnes. I thought Harrison Barnes did a really good job in the second half of this one, team rebounding to take away second chance opportunities from Steven Adams specifically. It's a team effort with these sort of rotations. I mean, when you can't contain anyone on the perimeter, like we've seen, there's so many defensive rotations on the back end, and that caused, all the helping the helper stuff in order to limit Adams or whatever offensive rebounder happens to be in the game for Memphis at the time. And I thought that Harrison Barnes did a good job limiting that. Do I wish he would have shot the ball more and you would have felt him more out there? Just 12 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists in his 32 minutes with 4 of 10 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3. Like, I would have wanted more from Barnes, but he's not somebody I look at and I'm like, man, he didn't fill his role today. He didn't do what you have come to expect of Barnes. And I think that's because sometimes Barnes is a little bit inconsistent in his offensive contributions, but he does all the little things well. And I think you can check that box tonight. Tyrese Haliburton, I think it was probably an interesting transition for him, going from the extreme usage that we had seen in the past 4 games to now having a lot of guys back, specifically De'Aaron Fox alongside him. But I'm not really going to complain about 32 minutes with 18 points, 7 assists, 3 steals, a block, and then there's 3 turnovers in there as well. I thought he could have done, he maybe could have taken, I don't really have too many complaints for Haliburton. I think he's another guy that everybody deserves shit for this game. But I think that when we're talking about looking at yourself in the mirror and did I do most of what I could tonight in order to contribute to winning basketball, I think Tyrese Haliburton is a guy that likely, he probably doesn't say that to himself, because after every one of those last 4 games where he notched 20 and 10 at least, he was always pointing out one of his flaws or areas of potential improvement. So I'm sure Tyrese isn't looking at it as, oh man, yeah, I did everything I could. I think this is part of the reason that we've seen such outlier growth from Tyrese between year 1 to year 2 at Iowa State, between year 2 at Iowa State to his rookie year in the NBA, from last season to what we saw specifically in that 4-game stretch of the 2010 averages coming into this year. I think that mindset of constant growth and recognizing and being willing to hear and focus on the areas of needed improvement is just part of Halliburton. But I think that he's a guy that I feel fine saying did what he could. Could have done more, sure. But it's not like one of those things where it's like, man, I really didn't give it enough tonight, in my mind. Because I think there are guys that stand out a little bit. Like Fox, is not one of those, to be clear. I realized I was kind of getting to that. Didn't quite feel like that to me. He was extremely underwhelming, but I don't think it was quite a lack of effort from him. He did talk about kind of needing to get back into game shape. He was asymptomatic, like I mentioned earlier, when he was dealing with COVID throughout health and safety protocols, but still needs to get back in game shape a little bit here. So, yeah, I mean, obviously you want more than these 12 points, 5 assists, and specifically 7 turnovers that you had from Fox. But, maybe I shouldn't just like write it off because I'm trying to get to one guy in specific, to be honest. Because Fox needs to be better, but I think that we can trust Fox to be better. People have been very critical of De'Aaron this year, and there's understandable reason for that. But I just think it's important to point out that prior to going down, Fox was playing some of the best basketball that we had seen from him. In the 5 games before he went into health and safety protocol, he was averaging 26.8 points, only 2.8 assists because it seemed like the emphasis was on him being more of a scorer, but clearly you're fine with that when he's giving you 26.8 a night on 58% from the field, only 26% from 3, but then also about 77% from the free throw line. Like Fox was playing really good offensively prior to going into health and safety protocol. So he's a guy that I look at and I'm like, man, he's going to kind of come back around in that aspect. And he needs to clean up some of the perimeter containment just as much as Tyrese Halliburton or Terence Davis does as well. Davion Mitchell will obviously be a big impact in that aspect once he's able to return. But the other guy that obviously needs some work as well on the perimeter is Buddy Hield. And when I hear this whole look in the mirror and did I do everything that I could tonight, can I honestly tell myself that I feel like this was a, B-level effort from me even? Buddy Hield is the standout guy to me that I don't think so. Like, we've seen recently, there was a conversation Sean Cunningham caught at the end of the first quarter in one of the recent games. I want to say it was the game against the Clippers before Memphis. Yes, it was, where Harkless was visibly frustrated and expressing that frustration towards and kind of at Buddy Hield for what I assume is a defensive lapse. And when I hear this lack of sharpness, it's Buddy and Bagley's the other guy that stands out to me as well. But Bagley hasn't been much of a factor on this team. They're not all too concerned with giving him all too many minutes. And I think once he was able to fill that smaller role and willing to be a role player on this team, that we saw him doing okay. But Buddy Hield is a guy, like, I mean, listen to the difference between these last 2 games that we've seen from Buddy Hield, because it's the amount of shots that he's getting up. And I understand it's notable, all the guys returning from health and safety protocol that I pointed out. That led to him playing 23 minutes against Memphis compared to the 43 that he played against the Clippers. And the differences in those minutes played is important to keep in mind as I get into these numbers here. But listen to this difference. In the game against the Clippers, 16 points, because he shot the ball 22 times from the field and 18 times from three. Then against Memphis, he goes from 22 field goal attempts to 3 and 18 attempts from beyond the arc to 2. Like, for all the issues that and flaws, I guess, that Buddy Hield has in his game, elite 3-point shooter, right? He hasn't been great this year. He's down to 37% from 3 on about 10 attempts a game, but career 40% 3-point shooter, like, that's the one aspect you do not worry about Buddy Hield, right? And while he's out there, he's still supplying spacing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. He is actively harming the team on the defensive end because there's too often that he is, when you try to look at where did this defensive possession go wrong, I mean, I don't want to be over dramatic, but I feel like more than half the time, Buddy Hield is the answer. Or it's that teams decided, for example, against the Clippers, Eric Bledsoe realized, I can just drive through Buddy Hield every single time. Terrence Mann did the same thing. And then on the offensive end, while he is this elite 3-point shooter, he makes one shot, maybe makes one free throw after being cold and throwing up a lot of ill-advised shots earlier in the game, and all of a sudden he feels deserving of a heat check. We've seen Mo Harkless been frustrated with him for not setting great screens on this Spain pick and roll action that they love to, that Sacramento has been running a lot, specifically since Gentry has taken over. And Buddy Hield doesn't actually set the screen on the defending big man. Instead, he kind of just brushes off and then moves straight to the 3-point line where he's hoping to get the ball and get an opportunity to throw up a shot. It's the sharpness on both ends of the floor. And there's been so many moments where teammates and coaches are just visibly frustrated with Buddy Hield throughout these last couple games. I am certainly not trying to say that this is all Buddy Hield's fault. It's not. It goes on everybody, just like Gentry said, from the top to the bottom. Monty McNair, Vivek, Gentry, Doug, Fox, Tyrese, everybody deserves some sort of bit in this, that they could have done more. But Buddy is the guy every single night where you're like, man, he's hurting you out there. And the inconsistency that you get from him, he's not even checking the one box that you felt like you would reliably get from him in 3-point shooting. He's hurting you when he's out there. And it's frustrating. And it looks like it's frustrating the rest of the team from, this is from the outside, obviously. Yeah. I think that the Buddy situation needs to be addressed. James Ham asked Alvin Gentry at the end of this presser, that there's been multiple players meetings. We've seen a coach's change. At what point is there more change that needs to be made? Almost hinting towards a roster switch up, right? Of some sorts, I would assume through trades. At least that's how I took it. And this was Gentry's response to that. And yeah, here's how Gentry responded to the idea of when is more change needed.
But, we like the players that we have. We think that we're good enough to win games. Obviously, we feel that way. Everybody feels that way. The coaches, basketball ops people, we all feel like we have the necessary people to win games, but we have to do that on the court. And we haven't done that on the court. And so we have to, as a coach, my job is to continue to try to figure out what combinations of guys can we put out there so that we can accomplish that. That's what I've got to look at. The other part I don't worry about. I worry about who we got here right now. And I like the people that we have here right now, but we have to perform. You know, we have to perform to the level that we can start winning basketball games. And that's the main thing that I look at. That's my job. You know, anything else, you'd have to take that up with someone else. But my job is that we have good enough players here to win games. How the hell do we get them to the position where they believe that and that we can win games?
There's a lot of reading between the lines with these things that I'm like slowly in the process of learning. Maybe I'm off base here. I don't think that the roster is good enough to win that many games. I don't know what the team's supposed to be good at. Like, what can they fall back on? They're not a good three-point shooting team. They lack playmaking. After Fox and Halliburton, Davion's all right. After that, I don't know who's a good playmaker on this team. They clearly can't play defense. They lack physicality on that end to be a pesky in your shorts defense that forces turnovers. They don't have the great physical. They don't have ideal physical tools to contain on the perimeter. They don't have any sort of high level rim protector. They're not going to be a good defense, right? They don't have the roster for that. And I don't know what they're supposed to be good at. I don't know what the roster can consistently be good at. We've heard pace. Gentry says speed is the best aspect of this roster. He said that like since he's taken over, right? And pushed pace nonstop. Any team can decide that they want to run their ass off. Like most modern rosters could look and be like, well, we just want to be a really fast team. I don't know what this team's supposed to be good at. You know, I kind of felt like Gentry kind of hinted at being frustrated with the roster. Not hinted at intentionally or anything, but I kind of felt a little bit like he's frustrated with the roster that he's dealing with. You know, I worry about who we got here right now. If you want to talk about that, you got to take that up with somebody else. He said, obviously, we all feel that way when it comes to this roster being good enough. Do I think that, you know, the roster construction makes this sort of breakdown in the second half of Memphis inexcusable? Absolutely not. But I don't know that the roster has a lot of clear flaws that I think Monte McNair deserves some flack for. I don't know what this team is supposed to be good at. So like Gentry says, it's his job to go out there and properly optimize the guys that he has in front of him. And they've shown an ability to be more, but I just don't think he's being dealt a great hand is what I'll say. Changes. It feels weird to say need, but like, I don't know how you cannot at this point. Changes need to be made. And Buddy Hield's the guy that stands out to me. He says he's going to do whatever he needs to, Gentry that is, to get the right combination of guys out there. I wonder if it's actually a possibility to not play Buddy for a game. You know, I didn't think it was a possibility with Marvin. And we saw that happen at the beginning of the year. Obviously, circumstances are different because Marvin is going into a year where the Kings could give him a qualifying offer and potentially make him a restricted free agent if they chose to do so, while Buddy Hield still has years left on his $20+ million deal and is somebody that, you know, we've publicly known for years now. And Jason Anderson of the Bee has reported this year as well that it's still the same. I forget what other source we've heard the same thing, but Hield's available. So what does it say if you bench the guy you're paying $20 million a year trying to sell as an asset to other teams when you're sitting here at 13-21 yourself and this guy can't even contribute on what bluntly is a horrible team. So while Gentry says that he's going to do whatever he can, I wonder what he's allowed to do with Buddy's situation, because it's interesting. And yeah, that inconsistency in the amount of shots we saw Buddy get up kind of leads to a little bit more responsibility from some other guys. I talked about Terence Davis, I think, being really aggressive. I personally think Terence Davis has filled that spot that we've wanted or needed from Buddy recently before he was entered into health and safety protocol better than Buddy. I'd rather see him or Harkless in the starting lineup, but so much inconsistency on who is going to be that fourth starter. And, I think Metsu and Harkless are the guys that specifically stand out of going from these drastic, quick changes of DNP CDs to all of a sudden in the starting lineup. Terence Davis has experienced the same thing. Alex Len and Tristan Thompson are, seen on some nights and not on others. And the impression I get is that that's expressed to them going into that game, what the expectation is. But I think the rest of the guys could be a little unsure. Bagley as an example, I think Damian Jones is a player that it's hard to figure out the formula on when it's decided for him to get some minutes. And those inconsistencies are something that, I've been curious about. How much does that impact these primary playmakers and the guys that you do consistently see, Fox, Halliburton, Barnes, Holmes, compared to knowing who they're out there playing with? But Terence Davis gave a little bit of perspective here on what it's like for the guys that are getting those inconsistent minutes themselves.
It's kind of tough, no excuses whatsoever. But as the season been going on, man, it's just there's nothing just that's solid as far as lineups, things of this sort. It's tough, man. So guys don't know when they're playing. Guys, I don't mean to talk on it, but the facts are the facts, things of that sort. So I just feel like once we really all get on the same page, all aboard. I feel like this team is very talented. We have very talented guys, man. I can't stress enough. We have very talented guys, man, who can play with anyone. So, like I said, once we tie together, it'll come along.
Yeah. And, I saw some people, Terence Davis mentioned that when he was in health and safety protocol that he, getting the opportunity to kind of watch some of the games from home, he noticed the trend of the Kings coming out slow at the beginning of the third and then slowly needing to catch up from that point on. And some people were responding to when I put that on Twitter, other people that media members that had put that out as well, saying that, Terence Davis is taking shots, or, why is Terence Davis the one out here spitting facts, or however people wanted to say it. And it's just Terence Davis was who media gave to us. He had a decent game. Usually they're not going to throw guys out there aside from the stars and the coach as well. They're not going to throw guys out there no matter how they played. So TD had a good game. He doesn't talk to media all that often. And I think that the things he's expressing are just very blunt. And I don't think there's other intentions of him taking shots at people or any sort of nonsense like this. I think he's just telling it how he sees it. I don't think that he talked to Toronto media much, if at all, because of complications and that I won't get into. He hasn't talked to us in Sacramento all that often. So I think just keep that in mind with some of these quotes that you saw from TD, and he was put out there after a really tough situation. So, he just kind of backs up the same thing that we hear, is that there's been a lack of consistency that really makes it difficult to find for things to click for the Sacramento team in a way that they really need to capitalize on the talent that's on this roster, because the roster is talented, like TD talks about. And then a little later in the conversation, he, being Terence Davis, was asked by Jason Anderson of the Sac B about if this team lacks leadership. And Jason, pointed to Davis's perspective that he has coming from Toronto, and asked, does this team lack leadership? And here's Davis's initial response to Anderson's question.
Is there enough leadership here?
I don't know. Is that a trick question? Like,
I know it's putting on
It's tough, man. I don't want to, I'm not a guy to, point fingers or anything of that sort, but, you know, there's a whole different situation over there in Toronto as far as, them winning and things of that sort. So, it's kind of like, all right, you stepping into something where it's, they just won a championship. So obviously, the room and things of that sort is different, but I don't think we lack leadership. I just think we lack a leader's voice, if that makes sense. We don't really have a leader's voice. We have leaders. Their voice isn't being heard enough, honestly. That's just my opinion.
First of all, the most hilarious line unintentionally, and as you can see, Davis, TD was, doesn't do media all that often, and was getting asked some pretty tough questions after an embarrassing performance, and is following up a coach that just absolutely chewed out his entire team. So tough situation, getting asked tough questions. But first of all, the most hilarious thing when he asked about Toronto, he's like, the whole situation in Toronto is very different. And then he says, with them winning and things of that sort. I just thought that's hilarious. He's like, like they win basketball games. It's just different over there. And it's, again, not TD taking shots. It's blunt. It's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And to his point on leadership, that they have leaders, but the voices aren't being heard, I think it could be interpreted in a few ways. I think the way to not take this, in my mind, is that they have to change up the top talent on this team. You specifically look at De'Aaron Fox, right? Your best player doesn't have to be your vocal leader and motivator. I think of Draymond Green. I think that he absolutely fits that. When you look at, who else do we got here? Look at really should have some decent examples in front of me, huh? I think that Memphis, for example, no, Ja fits that. It is admittedly almost 6 a.m. and I haven't slept, so I apologize, but main guy does not have to be the vocal leader. It can come from other aspects. It can come from your coaching, for example. And it could come from a starter level player. It can't come from a guy that's sitting on the bench and hardly impacting the game on the floor. Talking about a Garrett Temple, Iman Shumpert, Tristan Thompson. Their voice has to carry more weight. Like TD is saying, that isn't happening. The voice isn't getting through. The leadership voices that they do have isn't getting through. And it could be because it's coming from these lesser guys. So it's not necessarily that it needs to be from the top guy, that it's like, well, Fox has to check that box. He's getting paid a ridiculous amount of money. He's the max guy on this team. Would it be great for him too? Obviously. But it's not a necessity. It can come from a different guy that is deserving of that's one of the 6 best players on this team, playing 25 plus minutes every single night. I think what TD said also can be interpreted as certain guys aren't listening. Hate to harp on him a bunch, but I think I have understandable reason that, like, Buddy Hield's a guy we've seen getting lectured, talked to a lot, and we see a lot of the same mistakes. There's a lot of the same mistakes throughout the entire roster, but I think Buddy specifically seems to be a guy that sometimes things aren't resonating and sticking. So 2 different ways that you can kind of take that from TD. I certainly don't look at it as a Fox needs to be that guy. It's a personality thing. And if he's not that, that's not a big deal. That doesn't mean he can't be kick-ass at basketball. My bad for not being able to come up with better examples on the spot. But yes, there are teams that if you go look throughout these rosters, and I will do that again here soon and tweet it just for the sake of me not making a straw man argument where there's not actually anything. I've done this before on this pod. It does not need to be the main guy. It's a personality thing. And if Fox does not have that personality, it doesn't mean that he can't be worth max money. Not saying that he has been this year, but he still absolutely can be without being this like crazy vocal leader. And Fox was the one other guy that we did get to talk to after that Memphis breakdown. It was pretty quick. You know, Fox gives pretty short answers. And the one clip that I am going to include here, because there's a lot of Fox saying, you know, we just have to be better. We have to be able to utilize and optimize the talent that we have on this team. Jason Anderson asked him, you know, we hear a lot of the same things over and over. Actually, I include the clip. I include Jason asking the question. I think it's pretty quiet. So if you can't hear it amazingly, it is Jason, you know, to paraphrase saying, you know, we have heard a lot of the same things over and over. Like what's going on? Pretty much it's the same things over and over. What needs to change? And I just, De'Aaron Fox's response was notable. So here's that.
De'Aaron, what do you feel like the answer is? We sense the frustration, you know, obviously from Alvin and from you guys. I don't know. It just has been so repetitive, and you know, it's not like the roadmap's not there, and you've got to do this, got to do that. You guys say the same things over and over. What's it going to take to actually put it all together?
So do you want to hear it again? I mean,
I guess I'm asking why it's not happening.
I don't know. We have to be able to put it together.
We've heard the same things over and over. What's it going to take to put it all together? Fox's response was, so do you want to hear it again? There's no answer. Like, they need to get their shit together. They need to look in the mirror. They need to hone in on their sharpness. Everybody needs to, like Gentry said, be able to comfortably, confidently say at the end of each one of these games that they did everything they could to impact and help aid in the Kings' effort to get a win that night. And just don't think that guys have been able to say that consistently enough. There's certain guys that specifically stand out to me. I do feel tough for constantly going at him in this episode, but I think it's understandable where I'm coming from here. Like, Buddy Hield is, when you talk about a lack of sharpness, just listen for it. All these things that you are hearing players being frustrated about, and all of the read between the lines. And there's a lot of moments where I think if you're looking for it, you're going to see so many things that we're hearing. Buddy Hield fits that. What was just said, it wasn't directed at Buddy specifically, but, oh, he fits that box. Oh, he also fits this from a couple of days ago. Or we saw the Harkless and Buddy interaction, and then Tyrese Halliburton gets asked post-game about Buddy Hield's play and instantly compliments Maurice Harkless's play before getting to Buddy Hield. I saw other people word it as, oh, we know what side he's on between Buddy and Mel. It goes a lot deeper than this, but Buddy's a problem right now. I know I'm saying it's not all on him and saying that, but also making it sound like it is. It does go deeper. Like, Fox and Halliburton need to figure out how to both have really stellar games at the same time, and that not be a rare sight. Harrison Barnes needs to up his aggressiveness and keep that going. The Kings need to figure out who the hell their fourth starter is going to be, because it honestly cannot be Chimezie Metu. Defenses do not care about him shooting the ball, and he's not hitting at even a decent clip this year. So there's more issues. Rashaan Holmes has been terrible, but he needs time to get back into game shape. I think that's understandable with maybe the most significant injury he's ever dealt with in his career. So it goes deeper than Buddy, but Buddy is the one that really stands out to me. And yeah, I don't know what the Kings need to do to address that. I think Fox coming out and saying, so you want to hear it again, in response to it's been the same shit. What's the answer? Fox like, so you want to hear it again? I think it's understandable because there's not some complicated fix that like hasn't been tried yet or something. With the team that is out there right now, everything that we've heard is still the same issues that have yet to be fixed, and a lot of it comes down to looking themselves in the mirror. So with the loss to Memphis, Kings are sitting at 13-21. They're tied with the Oklahoma City Thunder for 12th in the Western Conference standings, and the Thunder are actually the team that the Kings play on the 28th, Wednesday. So they'll be, I guess, fighting for sole possession of that 12th spot, which is certainly something. But while they're sitting there, tied for the 12th spot with OKC, it's important to keep in mind they are just 4.5 games behind the 5th seed in the Western Conference. There's only 4 teams, 5 after the Clippers did get a win, that are, they lost, but there's 5 teams in the Western Conference only that are above 500. So the Kings are still absolutely in the playoff race, the play-in race. It'd be really difficult for them to not remain in that race. So yeah, even though the record is 13-21 is kind of dreadful to look at with expectations coming into the year, even though there have been all these COVID-related unavailabilities. I think a lot of teams have had to deal with that. Sure, the Kings are one of the teams that have had to deal with it. They're on the higher end of the amount they've been affected by that, but I think there's a handful of teams that fit in the same sort of tier as them. It's not an expectation I think anybody should feel comfortable making, to be honest. So yeah, while they're in this spot, like I said, 4.5 games out of the 5th seed, they also are just 2.5 games out of the 15th seed in the Western Conference. So feels similar a little bit to last year, where it's like, all right, which side do we want to commit to here? And given no reason to think that it's not going to be chasing the play-in, because yeah, 4.5 games from the 5th seed, 3 games from the 7th seed, which is the Los Angeles Lakers, by the way, is really not that far away. And we've seen the Kings, although they now have lost 7 of their last 9 when you include this horrific Memphis game. We've seen them have quick stretches where, that they go through slumps like this, and then also have these stretches of really encouraging basketball that makes the entire fan base believe again. And all of a sudden the record looks really promising, or the standings look really promising, and getting to play OKC, who they're tied with in the standings, and then also getting to play Dallas, who are sitting in that 8th seed. The Kings are only 3 games behind Dallas in that 8th seed, getting to play Dallas for 2 games in a row, both at Golden One Center, and Luka Doncic is expected to be unavailable in health and safety protocol himself for both of those games. Is a really big opportunity for the Kings. And then they have another home game against the Miami Heat before they go on the road against the Lakers. Yeah, as disappointing as it is, and I know it seems like I harped on this one Memphis game a lot, but really it's just me pointing out that the same issues are still here, and guys are frustrated. Shit's not changed. We're seeing the only consistent thing this year has been that the team has been inconsistent. 29th in defensive rating, when there was all the talk about the team needs to be better on defense. They went from 30th to 29th. They're not good on offense to make up for it. They're 18th in offensive rating. They don't space the floor well. They lack playmaking. Yeah, sitting at 25th in net rating. And there's some clear tiers here. The Pistons are 30th and the Magic are 29th. minus 9.7 net rating for the Pistons, minus 9.4 for Orlando. Two far and away worst net ratings. Two after that in another tier of their own, OKC minus 7.6 and Houston minus 7.1. And then the next jump, those are the clear four worst teams in the league. The next jump after that is a tier where Sacramento sits with the New Orleans Pelicans. Pelicans minus 4.3 net rating, and the Kings are minus 4.2. The next one that you see is Portland minus 3.3, so a significant jump there. And then after them, when you get to 23, is Washington with minus 2.7. So the Kings are one of only 6 teams in the NBA with a net rating worse than -4, worse than -3.5 even. I mean, they don't feel like they're worse than Detroit, Orlando, OKC, Houston. They don't belong in that tier, but I don't know that you can say that they necessarily belong with Portland, Washington, LA, Charlotte, New York. It's a tough situation. So as guys continue to work their way back into the rotation, it shouldn't be all too long until Neemias Queta, Davion Mitchell, and Alex Len are able to join. Hopefully they can find some sort of consistency or take advantage of this home stretch, I guess. So I think that's all I got. Take a look at the Kings Herald for work for myself and all the other great writers on that website. Take a look at their Patreon to support local independent Kings coverage. And if you enjoy this episode of the Kings Pulse podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. And you'll hear from me again here in the next couple of days.